The White House says that the U.S. is sending 10 F-35 fighter jets to Puerto Rico as part of an effort to combat drug cartels. This comes.
Switching gears for now, Britain's Royal Air Force is facing sharp scrutiny as a new report has now put focus on the effectiveness and the future of its F-35 fighter jet fleet.
Spain has shelved plans to purchase the U.S.-made F-35 fighter jets indefinitely.
70 years. That's how long every NATO fighter jet, every F-16, every F-15, and every F-35 has answered to one master. Not the country that flies them, not the pilots who risk their lives in them. Washington. Every engine, every spare part, every software update, every repair, all controlled by two American companies, General Electric and Pratt Whitney. And for 70 years, the rest of the world called that the price of security. Until now, this report breaks down why Canada is positioning itself to shatter that monopoly, what Ukraine's massive order just made possible, and how a 1959 trauma is about to become Canada's greatest revenge. Here's why this matters right now. For the first time since Avro Arrow was destroyed in 1959, Canada has the math to justify building fighter jet engines on Canadian soil. Zero American components, zero Washington veto power. And if Montreal opens that production line, it won't just power Canada's jets, it will rewrite the rules for every ally watching Trump weaponize dependence. If you appreciate in-depth analysis like this, subscribe to stay informed on the stories that truly matter. Let's start with what triggered this. March 2025, Prime Minister Mark Carney orders a review of Canada's F-35 purchase. 16 jets already delivered, 72 still pending. Cost ballooned from 19 billion Canadian dollars to 28 billion Canadian dollars. But the cost wasn't the issue. Trump was. 51st state rhetoric, 25% tariff threats. And then came the leverage play. January 26, 2026, U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra didn't suggest. He declared, if Canada doesn't buy F-35s, NORAD must be altered. U.S. jets will patrol Canadian airspace. Behind closed doors, Carney didn't panic. He ordered a review. No drama, no speeches, just a signal. But while Ottawa kept quiet, something bigger was unfolding 8 time zones away. October 22nd, 2025, Linköping, Sweden. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stood beside a Gripen E fighter jet. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson announced a letter of intent for 100 to 150 Gripen fighters for Ukraine, the largest Swedish arms sale in history. Delivery timeline 2026 to 2035. And that single contract changed the calculation because 1 month later, Colombia signed, November 14th, 2025, 17 Gripen E/F fighters, 3.1 billion euros, beat the F-16, beat the Rafale, delivery 2026 to 2032. 1 month after that, Thailand finalized 4 more Gripen E/F jets, August 25th, 2025, adding to the 11 Gripen C/Ds they'd already flown into combat on July 26th against Cambodia, combat proven, and Peru, evaluating 24 Gripen E/F fighters right now. $3.5 billion on the table. The Philippines? Watching Thailand's experience and talking to Saab about 40 jets. Do the math. Ukraine, 100 to 150. Colombia, 17. Thailand, 4 plus potential 8 more. Canada, if they choose Gripen, 72. Peru evaluating 24. Philippines considering 40. That's 200. 40 to 315 aircraft, and every Gripen needs an engine. Here's what nobody is talking about. The current Gripen E flies with a General Electric F414 engine, American made, which means even if you buy Swedish, you're still on Washington's leash for spare parts, software updates, maintenance approvals. Every repair requires U.S. export control clearance. Every upgrade goes through the Pentagon. Colombia almost lost their deal because Trump's administration debated vetoing the F414 export. They backed down this time, but the message was sent. Even non-American jets aren't truly independent if the engine is American. That's when everything changed, because in the 1990s, Sweden's Saab was offered another engine for the Gripen, the EJ200, built by a European consortium, Rolls-Royce in the UK, MTU in Germany, ITP in Spain, Avio in Italy, the same engine that powers the Eurofighter Typhoon. Zero American components. Zero U.S. veto authority. Saab rejected it back then. choosing GE's F414 for cost and political reasons. But in 2025, with Trump threatening allies and Ukraine needing hundreds of jets that can't be shut down by Washington, Saab offered the EJ200 again, and this time, Sweden's listening. The numbers are undeniable. The EJ200 has logged over 2 million flight hours across 610 Eurofighter Typhoons in 9 countries, combat proven in Libya, Syria, Iraq. The Typhoon fleet just passed 1 million aircraft flight hours in January 2026, meaning 4 million cumulative engine hours. Failure rate? Less than 1 incident per 1,000 flight hours. That's exceptional for a military turbofan. And the proposed EJ230 variant, an upgraded version, delivers 26,000 pounds of thrust. That's more than the F414's 22,000 pounds. Better performance. European supply chain, no American kill switch. But here's the problem. There's no EJ200 production line for the Gripen yet. Building one requires scale. You don't open a fighter engine factory for 50 jets. You need hundreds, 300 to 400 engines over a decade to justify the investment. And until October 2025, that number didn't exist. Ukraine changed that. 100 to 150 aircraft is a game changer. Add Colombia's 17, Thailand's 12 eventual total, Canada's 72 if they switch. Peru's 24, suddenly you're at 240 plus jets. That's 300 to 400 engines when you count spares and attrition replacements. That math, that critical mass, is what makes a Montreal production line possible. And Montreal isn't starting from scratch. Rolls-Royce Canada has operated in Lachine since 1947, 78 years, over 5,000 engines serviced. A facility spanning 520,000 square feet with 5 test cells, the largest rated for 100,000 pounds of thrust. A workforce of 1,100 to 1,700 highly skilled technicians already maintaining BR700 and TAE engines for over 600 operators in 30 plus countries. The infrastructure exists, the expertise exists. What didn't exist and until now was the demand. Here's where the arrow enters. February 20th, 1959, Black Friday, and Prime Minister John Diefenbaker canceled the Avro Arrow program. The CF-105 Arrow was the world's most advanced interceptor, Mach 1.98 without specialized engines, Mach 2 Plus with the Canadian-designed Orenda Iroquois. Fly-by-wire controls, a first for any operational aircraft. Delta wing design decades ahead of its time. On October 4th, 1957, the same day the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, Canada unveiled the Arrow to the public. It flew in March 1958. Test pilots called it extraordinary. And then, in February 1959, Diefenbaker killed it. Not just canceled, destroyed. All 5 prototypes were cut apart with blowtorches. Blueprints were eliminated. Tooling was scrapped. The order came from Ottawa. Erase it all. The reason? Fear of Soviet espionage. But the result was a national trauma. 14,500 jobs lost overnight. Engineers fired, families uprooted, and the best of them, 32 Avro engineers, including Chief Aerodynamicist Jim Chamberlain, went south to NASA. They became lead engineers on Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. Canada built the mines that put Americans on the moon because Washington let Canada's aerospace industry die. The lesson Canadians learned that day: never build your own. For 66 years, Canada bought American jets, CF-104 Starfighters, CF-18 Hornets, and now F-35s, every single one powered by American engines. GE or Pratt and Whitney, every repair approved by Washington, every upgrade vetoed or greenlit by the Pentagon. Dependence became normal until Trump made it a weapon. What Trump didn't expect was the calendar. 66 years after Black Friday, a different Canadian prime minister faced a different American president making the same threat: accept our terms or lose your sovereignty. But this time, the math had changed. This time, Ukraine needed 150 jets. Colombia needed 17. Thailand needed 12. Peru wanted 24. And this time, there was an engine with 0 American parts that could power all of them. Saab Bombardier talks, first reported in late 2025, are substantive, not exploratory. Substantive because Bombardier knows aerospace manufacturing. Montreal knows Rolls-Royce engines. And if Ukraine's order goes through, if Colombia's jets start arriving in 2026 as scheduled, if Thailand's combat-proven Gripens keep flying without a single single American veto, then the business case writes itself. 12,600 high-skilled jobs according to Saab's estimate, a Canadian supply chain, no foreign approval desk for upgrades or spare parts. This isn't about rejecting the F-35. Canada already has 16 of them. This is about the 72 still under review, and here's the twist nobody saw coming. It's not a choice between American dependence and European dependence. It's a choice between dependence and control. Because if Montreal builds that EJ200 line, Canada doesn't just get engines for Gripens. Canada becomes a producer, not just a buyer, a supplier to Ukraine, Colombia, Thailand, Peru, maybe even the Philippines. And that shift from customer to manufacturer is what turns a procurement decision into a strategic pivot. Let's be clear about what this isn't. This isn't happening tomorrow. Sweden hasn't finalized Ukraine's contract. Canada hasn't chosen the Gripen. Montreal hasn't broken ground on a factory. These are talks, positioning. But the seriousness is new, because for the first time in 70 years, Canada is exploring what was once unthinkable, breaking free of the American jet engine stranglehold. And the timing? It's perfect, because while Canada debates, Washington is distracted. Trump's tariff war with Canada, his threats to withdraw from NORAD, his 51st state rhetoric, every single move designed to force compliance. But it's having the opposite effect. Ambassador Hoekstra's threat, "We'll patrol your airspace," didn't cow Ottawa. It hardened resolve, because sovereignty isn't negotiable. And when you tell a country they don't control their own skies unless they buy your jets, you've just made the case for independence better than any sales pitch ever could. Here's what the 2021 RCAF report didn't tell you. The leaked assessment, F-35 scoring 57.1 out of 60, Gripen scoring 19.7. Compared a hypothetical future, Block 4 F-35 to a 2021 off-the-shelf Gripen C/D, not Gripen E, not the version flying in Brazil right now, not the version Ukraine is ordering. The Block 4 F-35 that scored so well. It's over 5 years late and $6 billion over budget, according to a September 2025 U.S. Government Accountability Office report. And the Gripen that scored poorly, that was the old model tested before Sweden joined NATO in 2024, which unlocked new interoperability protocols that closed the gap on mission integration. The report also buried the cost, F-35 sustainment, $1.1 billion per year for 88 jets. Gripen, $600 million. Training, $200 million annually for F-35 pilots versus $120 million for Gripen. By 2040, F-35 upgrades will cost $5 billion. Gripen, $2.5 billion. But the real cost, the one nobody put in the spreadsheet, is the cost of dependence. What's it worth to know that your jets can't be grounded by a phone call from Mar-a-Lago? That's the calculation Carney is making, not just dollars. Sovereignty. And it's the same calculation Colombia made when they chose Gripen over F-16. The same calculation Thailand made when they ordered 4 more after flying their Gripens into combat. The same calculation Ukraine is making right now as they negotiate the largest fighter deal in Swedish history. Because when Trump threatens to withhold F-16 support unless Ukraine surrenders territory, or threatens Canada with NORAD alterations, or holds F-35 parts hostage for political leverage, that's when allies start looking for exits. And here's what accelerates this: Trump's own precedent. In December 2025, Trump approved a potential F-35 sale to Saudi Arabia, breaking a years-long U.S. policy holdout. If Saudi Arabia, a country with a documented human rights record and no NATO commitment, can get F-35s, then the F-35 isn't about alliance anymore. It's about leverage. And if it's about leverage, allies will find alternatives. Colombia already did. Thailand already did. Ukraine is negotiating one right now. And Canada is positioning. But let's talk about what makes this different from every other alternative pitch. Because Canada has flirted with non-American jets before. Dassault Rafale got a look in 2018. Eurofighter Typhoon was briefly considered. Both fell apart. Why? Scale. You can't justify domestic assembly for 18 Rafales or 24 Typhoons, but 72 Gripens plus Ukraine's 150 plus Colombia's 17 plus Thailand's eventual 12. That's 250 plus jets. Add Peru and the Philippines, now you're at 300. That's not a niche order, that's a fleet. And fleets justify factories, and factories mean jobs. Not just assembly line jobs, engineering jobs, supply chain jobs, maintenance jobs, technology transfer jobs. When Saab pitches 12,600 jobs, they're not talking about screwing bolts on imported kits. They're talking about Montreal becoming a center for fighter propulsion in the Western Hemisphere. Brazil already assembles Gripen E airframes at Embraer. If Montreal builds the engines, you've got a transatlantic supply chain that bypasses the United States entirely. Commonwealth ties between Canada and the UK, Rolls-Royce. European expertise from Germany, Spain, Italy, MTU, ITP, Avio, and zero choke points controlled by Washington. Here's the dominoes scenario. If Canada moves forward, if Saab Bombardier Rolls-Royce finalize a deal, if Ukraine's order comes through and the first EJ 200-powered Gripen E rolls off a Montreal line in 2028. Then what? Peru has a template. The Philippines have a proof point. Even Poland starts looking, because Poland operates F-35s. But Poland also knows what it's like to have an unreliable partner. If Canada, a Five Eyes ally, a G7 member, a NATO founder, can break free of US engine dependence, then every mid-sized NATO country starts asking, why can't we? That's not speculation, that's precedent. In 2021, when Turkey was kicked out of the F-35 program over S-400 purchases, Ankara immediately started shopping alternatives. They're now developing their own 5th-gen fighter, the Can, with a British engine. When India chose Rafale over F-16, they cited strategic autonomy. When Indonesia walked away from F-16Vs for Rafale, they cited diversification. The pattern is clear. American leverage works until it doesn't, and when it breaks fast. Trump thought he had leverage over Canada. Tariffs, NORAD threats, 51st state mockery. What he created was a catalyst, because without Trump's pressure, Canada doesn't review the F-35 order in March 2025. Without that review, Saab doesn't pitch as aggressively. Without Ukraine's massive order creating scale, Montreal doesn't become feasible. Trump's own tactics gave Canada the excuse to explore, and Ukraine's desperation gave them the math to justify it. And here's the irony Trump won't see until it's too late. By weaponizing dependence, he's not strengthening America's defense industrial base. He's motivating allies to build their own. Colombia didn't choose Gripen because it's better than F-16 on every metric. They chose it because Saab offered technology transfer, local jobs, and zero political strings. Thailand didn't order Gripen E because it outperforms F-16 in all scenarios. They ordered it because after flying Gripens into combat in July 2025, they knew the platform worked, and they knew Washington couldn't ground them with a policy shift. Canada's calculation is the same. Maybe the F-35 is stealthier, maybe it's got better sensors, but if Trump, or the next Trump, decides Canada isn't sufficiently loyal and cuts off spare parts, what good is stealth when your jets are grounded? The Gripen won't beat an F-35 in a dogfight, but a flying Gripen beats a parked F-35 every single time. And if that Gripen runs on a Canadian-built Rolls-Royce engine that nobody in Washington can veto, that's not just a jet, that's sovereignty. Let's close with where this leaves us. February 2026, no final decision, no signed contracts, but more positioning than Canada has done on defense procurement in 66 years. Because this time, the question isn't can we afford it, it's can we afford not to? And the answer depends on whether you think Trump's threats were an aberration or a preview. If you think the next American administration will go back to treating allies like partners instead of vassals, then stick with the F-35. Keep the 72 jets on order. Accept the 28 billion Canadian dollar price tag and the Washington approval process. If you think Trump's approach was a one-off and won't be repeated, then dependence is manageable. But if you think what just happened over the last 2 years is the new normal, if you think leverage will only get worse as America turns inward and transactional, then sovereignty has a price. And that price is a Montreal engine factory, a Rolls-Royce production line, and 72 Gripen E fighters that answer to Ottawa. Not the Pentagon. Trump wanted Canada to feel dependent. Carney is building an engine factory. That's not defiance, that's insurance. And if Ukraine signs, if Colombia's jets start arriving this year, if Montreal breaks ground, then 66 years after Black Friday, the arrow finally flies again. Not as a prototype cut apart by blowtorches, as a production line that rewrites the rules for every ally watching Washington weaponize trust. Do you think this was leverage or a miscalculation?